Hi, everybody. My name is Stephanie. I'm the community manager here at Codecademy, and we're super excited to host this live interaction session, really designed to help sharpen your interview skills and to really gain confidence in your tech career journey. We're also super excited to have Melanie Williams, who is the in product and instructional design here at Codecademy, and she's been here with Codecademy for over 3 years. Today, Melanie is going to walk us through the Codecademy Interview Simulator and really demonstrate how to make the most of this powerful tool, no matter where you are in your career. Um, During the session, you'll be able to take a firsthand look at the simulator in action, participate in live scenarios, and then really have time at the end to ask Melanie about any questions about the interview simulator or any questions about her journey and her career in tech. So we'll leave some time at the end for a Q&A session. But today, Melanie will also send, or I can send over the link for the interview simulator. And if you want to follow along or practice on your own while Melanie is guiding us through the whole session, feel free to do that too. With that said, I will pass it over to Melanie. And any questions that come up, feel free to put them in the Q&A as the event is going.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephanie. So like Stephanie mentioned, my name is Melanie. I'm an instructional designer on the product team. And I'm really excited to share the mock interview feature with you all. I worked on it maybe, I want to say about a year ago, and we released it about 6 months ago. And it's still fairly new, but since we've released it, it's gotten a lot of really positive feedback. So I'm excited to share it with more people, get it in front of more people, and get you all's thoughts on it, and hopefully get you all excited to use it. So, if I'm not sure if the link has been shared out, but what I will do is I'm actually going to walk us through how to find it on the site. So walk us through the discovery of the feature. That way we can find it together. And then once we get there, I will send out a link also. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I would like to share this window. Awesome. So hopefully you can see my screen on the Codecademy website. And from here, if we want to discover this feature, there are a couple of steps to get there. So we want to start by going to codecademy.com. And if we scroll all the way down, scroll all the way down to the bottom, there's this interview prep section in the footer. And within this interview prep section, we have a lot of resources for learners who are interested in kind of like taking the next steps in their career. I think this is a great page to visit, whether you're ready to start immediately jumping into interviews or you just want to kind of like be forward thinking about what it takes to actually get into interviews. So a lot of great resources here. But Code Challenges is another feature that I'm really excited about that I also worked on. But if we scroll down to this section, explore other pro features and click into career services. So just to kind of recap where we were, we started at codecademy.com, scrolled down to the footer to the interview prep section, and then scrolled down where we found the career services link. And if we scroll down within this page, then we find the interview simulator. So I'm going to open it up. And I'll share a link directly to that also in case anyone had trouble getting there. Let's see if I can. I have not used Zoom in a while. Okay, let's see. Great. So I'm going to go ahead and share that. Cool. Okay. Great. So let's kind of get into the demo. So sorry, I'm trying to keep the Zoom window open. If anybody has a question or comments, maybe Stephanie, if you don't mind, just unmuting. I'm having a hard time keeping that window open, but awesome, thank you. Cool. So now we're in the interview simulator. So we can just kind of take this page in for a second. So this this feature. It gives you a great opportunity to kind of like go through and practice some interviews. What's really nice is that after you've gone through and practiced interviews, it keeps kind of a record of all of the interview experiences that you've engaged in. We will come back to this in a second, but let's maybe start by building an interview and exploring what that is like. And I'll just point out that this feature is in beta, so it's a pretty new feature. As I mentioned, we released it maybe about 6 months ago. My timeline for that might be a little bit off, but it's a fairly new feature, so still definitely certain things about the feature that we want to optimize. So as you get to try it, I think there's a survey within the experience. So as you get to like test out this feature yourself, please leave us feedback. You can also always interview. You can also always email our customer support team to leave any thoughts or feedback that you have about this. But we're really excited to get people using it so that we can figure out the best ways to kind of refine what we've created and make it better for you all. So I'm going to click into build an interview. And if you are following along with me, please go ahead and try to create your own interview. But I think what we'll do is, let me see. Sorry, I was trying to open up the chat. I don't know if anyone mentioned anything, but I think what we'll do is before we actually start building the interview, I just want to kind of talk through what the different settings are that you can customize for your interview experience. So we have job title. As you can see, it's kind of currently built for web development roles. We're hoping to add other roles later, but for now it's limited to, even within web development, it's a little bit limited. So it's limited to full stack engineer, front end engineer, and back end engineer. There's also job title, scenario, company type, and then your experience. So just for the sake of kind of like this exercise, let's click into full stack engineer. And what we tried to do when we prompt engineered the AI to create these interview experiences is we tried our best to get the AI to ask questions that were pertinent to the types of roles that you were asking for. So, again, as I mentioned, it's still very much a work in progress, but we really tried to like prompt engineer this in such a way that it would actually create a customized experience based on the settings that you choose. So we'll start with full stack engineer. And then if we go into job level, there are 3 job levels. So still a little bit vague, but just trying to, again, get the AI to ask questions that are appropriate for someone who's a beginner versus someone who's got a lot more experience. So I'll click entry level for now. And then I'm not sure how familiar you all are with the technical interview process, but there can be a few steps. There's usually a phone screen, a behavioral interview. Oftentimes there's a take-home assignment, and then there's generally ends up being a technical interview. So I think eventually we would love to get more of those interview experiences down. Right now, we're limited to phone screen and behavioral interview. And this is also great because it gives us an idea of, like, as you all kind of like choose between these options, it gives us an idea of what learners are the most excited about. Again, kind of limited to phone screening and behavioral, but I think eventually we really want to add in more technical interview experiences, final round interview experiences where you can practice things like negotiation skills and that sort of thing. But for now, we'll create a behavioral interview. And then the company type. So we have 3 options here, startup, medium enterprise, and then a multinational corporation. Again, just trying to get a feel for what sort of experiences our learners are looking for. I think in the future, I would love for us to maybe add other types of career experiences. So I think apprenticeships and internships is something that would be really exciting. I think that freelancing, like adding sort of interview experiences for freelancers would be really exciting. So yeah, a lot we can do here. but we'll try a medium enterprise. And then you also have the opportunity towards the end to enter your work and volunteer experience. So here you can kind of list, you can kind of just copy and paste your resume. Um, and then there are three sections within this, like your experience section. So you have the opportunity to add your resume, and then any projects or skills that you've worked on. I think if you want to add projects, it's probably best to do something like naming the project, but then also giving a brief description of it. And then any skills, so any languages that you're familiar with, any other technical skills that you might have, and then your education. And we take all of this in, again, to hopefully generate an interview experience that really takes into account some of the more nuanced and individual details that learners might want to go over. And what's really nice about this is that specifically your experience section, it persists. So as you saw when I opened up this section, all of this stuff was already there. So it's really nice in that you can update it, but you only have to kind of enter it once. Cool. And I see that someone raised a hand. Um, oops, I think I accidentally stopped sharing. My apologies. Okay, so it looks like we're going to take questions at the end. Um, so I will just kind of keep going. So if we click on this next section, sorry, it's taking me through this once more. And then it kind of tells us that we're going to have a behavioral interview with Gabby. So we have a couple of different AI interviewers. And I think that their personalities might be slightly different, but the actual interview itself shouldn't affect the scenario too much. But it's still nice to have kind of like a person and a face, and it makes the experience feel a little bit more real. So I'll click Start Interview. And it mentions that we're doing a behavioral interview with Gabby. And then it kind of, lets you know that the interview is going to get started in a few seconds. So again, kind of just jumping into it. What's really nice is that already we're getting to see some of that like customization. So Gabby says, "Hello, it's great to speak with you. I see that you have experience as a research assistant at Carnegie Mellon University." So already it's kind of like taking into account some of our personal experience and trying to customize the interview in a way that takes into account like the information that we've provided. So I think that that's really great. I really wanted to try to make this a bit more interactive. So I really wanted to like have an experience where we could kind of go back and forth and I could get like feedback in terms of like answering the questions and like maybe making it more of a sort of a crowdsourced interview. I think that what I'm realizing is that, and what I realized as I started preparing for this is that I think it in practice might have been a little bit more difficult just because there's quite a bit of reading and the interviews can take 10 to 15 minutes. And so by the time I really wanted to do like a side-by-side comparison and so walk us through two interview experiences. And by the time we had gotten to doing that, that would have kind of like drained us of all of our time. So instead, what I'll do is I'll kind of walk through some interview experiences that I've done and just call out a couple of highlights there. But I'm really excited to take any questions that you all have kind of towards the end. But while we're on this page, I will just point out a few things. So here's where you can kind of see a transcript of your interview experience. And as I mentioned, I'm not going to go too much into a live interview right now. If you have your window open, I definitely encourage you to, once the session is over, kind of try and experiment with it and see what a live interview experience would be like yourself. But for now, just want to highlight a few things. So you would see the transcript here. And when you're in the actual like live interview experience, again, I'm not going to quite go through it now, but if you were to start typing, this feed would continue scrolling down, but you would miss the opportunity to scroll up. So as you're in a live interview experience, you're not able to see, you can see what's on the screen, but you can't really scroll up to see past parts of your conversation. And I think that's kind of nice because it makes it feel like a real conversation. When you're like actually talking to somebody, you can't usually like go back in time and see what you've said. So it kind of keeps you like present and engaged in the conversation. And I guess to just kind of demonstrate what I mean by that, because I feel like I explained that in a kind of confusing way. But we'll just kind of go through really quickly. So she says, describe a situation where you've had to collaborate. So I say I've worked with many peers over my career. Um, and then she kind of like jumps into the next question. But as you can see, I'm no longer able to kind of scroll up. So that's sort of what I mean by that, in that it really keeps you like locked in and engaged in like the conversation in the moment. But after the interview is wrapped up and ends, then you can go back and see a full transcript of everything that you all discussed. Hopefully that makes sense. But again, if anybody has questions about that, we can get to that towards the end. Another thing I want to call out is that you have the speech to text option as well. So I can type my answer in, but if I have a lot to say, I can also do speech to text. So she says, can you share a specific example of a project where you collaborated with team members from different disciplines or just departments? Let's see. I've had a lot of fun working with my peers, and it's been really exciting to do the work that I do. So great, it transcribes my audio, which is really nice, and then I can make edits to it if it's not exactly what I wanted to say, and then we can send it off. Great, also. So that kind of gives you a sense of what the actual interview experience is like. Again, I'm not going to finish it now, but I definitely encourage you all to take time and like play around with it on your own, because I think it's really exciting. So let's go back actually to the saved interviews, and we'll kind of walk through some of the past interview experiences I have, and that's what we're kind of really get into the meat of the feature and some of, I think, the best parts of the feature. Aside from the interview itself, I think there's some really awesome features in terms of feedback and record keeping and that sort of thing. Cool. So now we are back on the main sort of page for the interview simulator. And the first thing that I want to call out here is that we have these interview cards. So I did a lot of testing of this feature, both on production and on our staging environment. So these are all of the interviews that I did on production in this account. So what's really nice is that it keeps a record of all of the past interview experiences that I've had. And actually, this is from January 2024. Time flies because it looks like we actually released this feature a year ago, which is hard to believe. But anyways, so yeah, so within these interview cards, you get kind of this score. And I really like the way we do the scoring because we don't give you a numerical score. We give you something that's a bit more qualitative. And I think that that's probably more helpful than something like a number. And then you start to get this like very short snippet of what your summary is. But it's really nice because we tell you the type of interview that you set up. So in the past, I've set up quite a few full stack engineering interviews. All of the ones that I've set up here have been full stack. Most of them have been behavioral. And then it tells you the date of that interview, which is great because you can kind of track your progress over time and you can sort of compare answers that you've given, you know, maybe 6 months ago to like answers that you're giving now once you've gotten like more practice and more experience. So I think that that's really great. It leaves out a couple of the other details about interview the interview that you set up. So it doesn't tell you, I guess, the size of the company that you were looking for, or the level of the role that you were looking for, but I think it includes the most essential details. Cool. Awesome. So if we click into this, then that's where, like I mentioned, we can kind of see a transcript of what we have discussed during that interview, which I think is really nice. Like, I think it's really great to be able to go back and see everything that you have talked about. Um, I think what I'll try to do is actually kind of do a side-by-side comparison of two different interview experiences so that you can really see like where the magic and the customization of these interview experiences comes from. So can you all still see my screen? I changed desktops, so I'm not sure. Um, but I'm gonna take the silence as that you all are still able to see my screen. If you're not, please let me know. And I'm trying to open up the chat. I'm not able to for some reason. Okay, awesome. Stephanie says you can see it. Perfect. Cool. So you should be able to see two kind of side-by-side interviews. So I don't know if I mentioned this or clarified this, but we use AI to generate a fresh interview for you every single time. So every single interview experience is going to have the same sort of tone and the same theme, depending on what settings you chose for your interview. But it is going to be slightly different every time. So you're going to get different questions, you're going to get different responses. So I think that that's really nice because it again kind of simulates what a realistic experience is going to be like. So if we take a look at these two interviews, the first question I'm being asked, I got the same interviewer both times, but still the first question I'm being asked is slightly different. So we get, can you describe a situation where you had to work with a team under a tight deadline? How did you manage your time and collaborate with others to meet the project goals? Versus this interview experience, where still asking about a team, but instead it's asking, could you tell me about a challenging project or task where you had to work closely with a team and describe how you contributed to the team's success? So different questions every single time. I think it's great because you also get to just practice a diversity of questions and really get familiar with all of the things you might be asked in a real interview scenario. So with these two interviews, what I really tried to do was I tried to simulate a bad interview where I was really, as the candidate, really disinterested, really unengaged, didn't really care, versus a good interview where, as a candidate, I was really excited and really eager, and sort of trying to do everything right. And one thing that I wanted to take note of is there's a slight difference. First of all, what we can see is a difference in the engagement from the interviewer. So in this question, and I wish I had a better way of labeling it, but I'll kind of just zoom in over here. So this is the bad interview experience that I'm showing you all. As you can see, I'm being really rude, like, ugh, fine. I didn't really care if we succeeded or failed. I just wanted to get it done and move on. Don't interview like this. And I just kind of said, can we get to the point? This is kind of boring. Super rude, obviously not a way that you would actually want to interview, but you can see that the interviewer is responding by just kind of keeping it brief, and sort of trying to keep the interview moving along as quickly as possible. So they say, I understand your perspective. Let's shift gears a bit. I appreciate your honesty. Let's move on. And so they're not being like super engaging. They're kind of just trying to like get through with the interview because I'm not being very nice. If we compare that to a good interview, you can see that, first of all, my responses are a lot longer. And I'm using exclamation points. There's just a totally different tone. I'm not going to ask you to read all of this, but it is, I think you can kind of glean just from the beginning that it's just a much different like conversational tone. Um, and then we look at the response from the interviewer, and it's a lot more engaging. They're a lot more excited to talk to me. So that sounds like a challenging yet rewarding experience. It's great to hear about how you effectively manage your time, foster collaboration, and adapted to unexpected challenges to meet your project goals. So you can see just between the two different experiences that like what's really nice about this feature is that the AI interviewer actually is responding to me and my engagement. They're actually being responsive to my style of communication. It's actually responding and giving feedback based on the things that I say. So it's not this sort of flat, generic interview experience where it's like question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. It kind of really does do, I think, a decent job of simulating what a conversational flow would feel like and what a conversational pace would feel like. In a real conversation, you're actually responding to what the person says. And I think that this does a really good job of kind of responding and customizing the responses to my answers and the things that I say. So, yeah, I think that that's a really cool thing about this feature. Let's see, how are we doing? Okay, cool. So I know we're kind of getting close-ish to time so that we can actually take questions. So I will sort of keep going through this. And the next thing that I really want to call out is the feedback. And I think that this is another place where this feature really shines, because I think it does an awesome job of giving really helpful feedback. And I guess before we get into the feedback, I will say that the interviews themselves tend to last, like I mentioned, about 10 to 15 minutes. I guess it depends on how long it takes you to type or how long it takes you to come up with a response. But generally, each interview is about 8 to 10 questions. And we found that it takes anywhere between 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes to get through. So that's just something to keep in mind. You want to make sure that you have enough time to complete the interview set aside, because if you close this window before you've completed your interview and gotten the summary, it still counts as an interview attempt, but you also don't get the feedback. So if I were to start an interview and close out of it, I wouldn't get any responses. I wouldn't get any feedback on how I performed if I closed out of it before the feedback was generated. But also, it would still count as an attempt, and you have a limited number of interview attempts in a day, even as a pro user. And I think just to call that out really quickly, I think free users, I believe you get one free interview attempt. If you upgrade to pro, you get 5 interview attempts per day. So there's still a limit, but it's much more, and you can that counter resets every single day. So you can do, I think, 35 interviews in a week. I don't think most people will reach that limit, but just to kind of make you all aware of that. But again, if you upgrade to pro, it's really nice because you can you can have multiple opportunities to try this feature out and to really like progress and develop your interview skills. So just really quickly, the last thing that I wanted to call out before I think we'll take questions is just wanted to again capture the feedback or discuss the feedback that you get. So the feedback is broken down into 3 sections: what you have done well in this interview, what your suggestions are for next time, and then kind of an overall assessment of your performance during that interview. And then again, as I mentioned, we give you a qualitative score rather than a quantitative score. So as I mentioned, this was a really poor interview experience. It says try again, sad face. And then this was a great interview experience. What's nice is that I think it does a good job of giving feedback that again is really custom to how you performed and how you engaged with that interview. It always is able to give you some sort of positive feedback. So in my negative interview, it says You were honest and straightforward in your responses and showed a steady disposition. Um, I think that maybe honesty is a nice way of saying that I was rude. But I think that it still tries to like give you some positive feedback in terms of like ways that you can things that you might want to continue doing in interviews and positive things to highlight. So I think that's really nice. But then it also does a great job of giving constructive feedback. So it kind of tells me right here, you'll have to show passion, initiative, and the willingness to overcome challenges. There needs to be an understanding and respect for teamwork, problem solving, adapting to change, managing tasks and time, staying motivated. All of these things that I did a really poor job in showing. So I think that it does a really good job of saying like, basically, hey, like if you want this job, you need to show that you care and that you want it. And it kind of tells me straight up, your responses reflected a lack of interest and engagement. Next time, try to be more clear and elaborate more on your experiences. Um, so I think that it does a really good job again of like assessing what I have given it as the candidate and giving me feedback that is genuinely constructive, that is responsive to the interview that I gave, and that is actually constructive and can help me progress and improve in the future. If we compare that to the behavioral, or I'm sorry, not the behavioral interview, but the great interview that I gave, even though I think that I gave an excellent interview, it's still able to point out some suggestions for next time. So I guess we can backtrack and just talk about what I did well. So it does a really good job of kind of calling out the positives so that I effectively delivered structured and insightful answers, clear examples. It speaks about the excitement and enthusiasm that I have for this type of role. So it calls out specifically communication, conflict resolution, feedback taking skills, highlighting how these situations have shaped me as a professional. So I think it does a really good job, again, of like giving that constructive feedback and telling me the things that I might want to keep doing. But it also does a great job of calling out things that I can improve on. So like I mentioned, I feel like I gave an excellent interview, but still it's able to call out some things that I could do to be even better. Um, so it says they were very thorough and filled with relevant examples, but it also mentions that my responses were a bit lengthy. And if you recall, they were like 3 or 4 paragraphs long. So it's just a reminder that interviews have a limited time, so it's important to be concise and choose the most impactful details to share. All really valid feedback, because even when you give detailed and thoughtful answers, it's still important to be mindful of time and make sure that your answers are concise enough that you're giving the interviewer an opportunity to A, understand what you're actually trying to say, and B, get in all of the questions that they have and learn as much about you as they can during that interview. So yeah, I think that that is hopefully kind of highlights the I think customization of this feature and the way that it is really responsive to the interview that you give. I think that it's a great feature and that it does a great job of helping to prepare you in the sense of exposing learners to what kinds of questions they might encounter in an interview, and also giving really, I guess, as realistic as possible for something that is more or less a written conversation. I think it does a pretty good job of giving you a realistic interview experience, and also giving very useful and constructive feedback. So I think with that, we have probably about 10 minutes left in this session. I will stop sharing my screen and um, I think if we would like to get into questions, we can. Again, I'm sorry that I wasn't able to make it as interactive as I would have liked, but hopefully you all were able to see what this feature can do and get excited about using it yourself.
Thank you so much, Melanie. We have about 10 minutes left, so this is our time to ask any questions that you might have in regards to the interview simulator that Melanie went over, or any questions for Melanie about her career in tech. To get us started, Melanie, there is one question that you did share, but if we wanted just to repeat it with our audience, could you just share the amount of times that users would be able to use this feature for those who are on a free account versus a pro account? And for the free one, if you can clarify if it's one free a day or just one in total. But some clarity around that would be great.
Yes, so it is one in total for a free account. And I'm going to just triple check, but it's one a day for a free account, and it's five a day, yes, for a pro account. Or I'm sorry, it's one total for a free account. So you have one attempt. Um, and then for a pro account, you have five attempts per day. So hopefully that clarifies.
Yes,
Sorry.
perfect. Any other questions? We'll give it about a minute for any other questions to come through. If not, we can wrap up early, but please use this time to ask Melanie any questions, anything else about her work that she's been doing for Codecademy, how she got to where she got.
I can definitely share a little bit about my background.
Yes, that would be great.
Yeah, so I actually did a coding boot camp to learn coding about 4 years ago. And then I got a job working at Codecademy about 3 years ago, as Stephanie mentioned. I started out as a curriculum developer, so I was actually creating content, which was super fun. And I was creating content for individual learners. So I created the MongoDB course. I did some work with the React Router course, and I did work with the Learn JavaScript course. And then when it was time for us to kind of update our React content, I worked on that also. And then in the past 2 years, I switched over to the product side. So I've been doing more work developing and planning out the educational experience for some of our features, including the code challenges feature, including the mock interviews, the AI generated hints, a lot of AI projects in the past couple of years. But yeah, I think Stephanie mentioned there's another question. So
Yes, thanks for sharing your background, Melanie. The first question we have is for these technical jobs, are interviews ever conducted in a way that might be different than another job? Do they use technical tools to show walkthroughs for problems, or are they standard interviews generally?
I would say they're definitely different. So I think that generally speaking, interviews for technical roles tend to have a considerable amount more rounds. So I think like a regular interview might be 2 to 3 rounds. And I think with a technical interview, you might be looking at closer to 4 to 5, depending on the company. And one of those rounds might be a take-home assignment. And then also during interviews for technical roles, there is usually some sort of technical interview. So probably looking at doing a whiteboarding assignment where you're not necessarily like, sometimes you're in front of a computer and you're actually like coding out your solution to the problem, but generally you'll be asked to solve some sort of technical problem, and then you'll be asked to either use a whiteboard to like write out what your thinking is, or you might be asked to kind of code it out on the computer. So those interviews can be a little bit more rigorous, but I think that we have a lot of great resources to help you kind of prepare for those more technical algorithmic type questions. But yes, generally technical interviews will require you to kind of like showcase at least the way that you approach problem solving in a technical way.
Thanks. We have some questions coming through about your boot camp experience. So, before your boot camp, did you have a degree or history in the tech field? And what was your focus when in boot camp?
Yeah, I did not have a degree in coding at all. I actually switched from like the biomedical science area into technology. Um, And I did a web development boot camp. So I learned front end engineering, back end engineering. We learned specifically jQuery, we learned React, Redux, Express, um, and then all about asynchronous JavaScript and deploying websites to the web. So yeah, hopefully that answered that question. I'm not sure if there was more to it, but
No, you answered it. Thank you. Do we have any more questions from the audience? If not, we are going to wrap up and give you 5 minutes back. Last question. We have one more. How do you stay up to date on all the tech that you use, Melanie?
Yeah, I think there are great blogs and websites to stay up to date. So there's Hack Reactor, there's Y Combinator. Medium tends to be a great resource for blogs. I'm also on a couple of mailing lists. So I don't quite remember the names of the mailing list, but I can try to look them up and share it with Stephanie if you want to share them out later. But yeah, I think that there's a YouTube is a great resource for just kind of like following some of my favorite YouTubers and seeing what languages they are talking about or keeping up to date with any of the languages that have had new iterations. So yeah, I think those are all great resources. Honestly, just Google has been my best friend when it comes to this kind of thing. So yeah, hopefully that's not too vague, but
Thank you. Um, 3 years ago, the job market was quite different. How can we make ourselves attractive for an employer without a computer science degree?
yeah, definitely we have seen a lot of changes. I think honestly, the best way to stay attractive is to just keep building. I know that that's kind of like that feels like even hearing myself say it, it feels like generic advice, but I think like kind of to the question, the point of the question earlier of how staying up to date with like industry news and updates, like really just trying to keep your skills relevant. So learning what the newest technologies are and then building something with it. And I think persistence. So yeah, and then I think another thing that's probably helpful as you're kind of like looking for a job, something that I think a lot of employers will probably appreciate is taking the time to, again, build projects, but also contribute to open source. So there's a ton of open source projects out there. And if you can show that persistence and that dedication by just continuously taking on new tasks and challenging yourself, I think that that's really, really valuable and something that employers look for. So.
And on that note, are projects within Codecademy enough to get a job?
I think that we offer a lot of great projects. And I think that I will say that I think they're a great starting point. So I think that like you will want to continue building as much as you can outside of the learning environment. So I think that conceptually, I think the projects on Codecademy are excellent for building up your portfolio and your resume, but most of our projects are on platform and exist within this kind of like insulated learning environment. I think it's really important to show that you can create things locally. So what I would suggest is maybe using Codecademy projects as a starting point and then taking it a step further or a few steps further by like bringing it to your local computer and figuring out how you can like continue building beyond the instructions that we've given you to build something even more robust with even more features and that sort of thing. So I think Codecademy is an excellent starting point, but it's important that at some point you show that you can also do this locally. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Melanie. Thank you so much for hosting this session for us and for your time. Thank you, everybody on this call for being here. As you know, tomorrow is going to be the last day for Operation Codebreaker to submit your guesses and your clues. So don't forget to do that. If you're looking for the letter, you'll see it somewhere very close to us. But thank you all for being here. If you want to access the recording of this session or our session from Tuesday, it is going to be uploaded on Codecademy's YouTube, and you could already find Tuesday session on that channel. So thank you everybody for being here. Thank you, Melanie, and I hope everyone here has a great day. Thanks so much. Bye.